So let's just start with that. Okay, so we watched this video, what was like a few days ago, last week, something like that.
Yeah.
It was with Catherine Austin Fitts, who I think she was like a former assistant secretary of housing or something like that in the
Yep.
government, something like that, right?
Yep.
So she's not just like a random nobody or something, you know. She
She
was
was
in the
also a
government.
financial portfolio manager for a while
Okay.
until she didn't like what was going on there.
But it was really cool because she talked about, I mean, what we've been talking about over the last few episodes, where we've been talking about the Great Reset. She didn't refer to it as that, but this book that we were talking about, I have it here on my desk. The what is it called? The Coming of Neo-Feudalism, right, by Joel Kotkin. I've been reading that, and I really like this. Actually, I wanted to share this with you guys. I made a post on my Facebook, but this guy, he said something that I was saying within one of my videos. Let me just find it real quick. It was really good. Where is it? Well, I'll just make the point instead of reading it. But basically, he made this point that right now you see this big push for like communism's hyper progressivism, you know, all of this. We've been talking about a lot of that stuff on the podcast too. But then also, and I think that's kind of why we're sort of an enigma in a way, because we're saying those same things, right? We're saying we want everybody to have what they need. We want everybody to be taken care of. Everyone should have a basic income. But we're also, we don't agree with the whole, you know, hyper focus on LGBT and all this other, and like, you know, racism and all this other stuff. Those are all just symptoms of people who are unstable because of not having those basic things, right?
Yeah.
We don't need to adjust all the stuff in the world to make them feel comfortable. We just need to solve the actual real fundamental problem. And I think that's the problem, is it takes the left, right, as a group, takes those who see that there's problems and says, like, when I say the problems, I mean the people on the short end of the stick, right? The people who don't have a good education, didn't have a good upbringing, didn't have stability. Those people are getting left behind by the system. And it kind of brings those into something that's not the solution. And then on the right, you have the people who sort of already have something and they're just trying to protect it. You see what I mean? And so, but they don't like these other people trying to take what they have. So they have a fear of the communist stuff, right? And we agree with that too. You know, like, we're not saying take from these people and give to these people. That's not necessary. That's still believing in lack. But this book is really cool because it's not right wing. The guy says the problem with the right is they don't consider that part. And I'm like, amazing, right? Because there's very few people who will be able to talk about both sides. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
The progressivism stuff is insane. The hyper, what was it? It's that sort of everyone has an opportunity to succeed sort of BS, right? And I'll look for it while we're talking, but he had this really good quote in there about why, about how here it is right here. I just found it. Let me just look real quick.
He lied just to keep.
No, I didn't lie, but I did.
I didn't lie. I just fibbed. Okay.
I just didn't tell the truth.
I just didn't tell the truth. What would you call that?
This morning I was talking to Max about something. I'm trying to remember what it was, but he said it was something we were looking for, and I didn't know if we had any, but then we did have something of it. And he was like, well, Cameron, that was a lie. You were lying. And I was like, well, look, let me tell you the difference between lying versus but not knowing something, right? And I said, I wasn't deliberately lying. I actually didn't think it. So I was incorrect, right? And so I was just explaining to him the difference, you know.
Yeah, the difference with as like
intention behind it doesn't mean, but I'm not making it like, don't call me a liar. Lying's bad. Like, being incorrect is also bad. Like, it's also not best, right? So it's not like it's any better. I'm just saying there's a distinction when we say someone's lying versus they made a mistake or they're incorrect or whatever, right? But I'll see if I can find this. I still don't see the exact quote I was looking for, but the little section is called "Losing Faith in Liberal Democracy," and it's just really cool because he is explaining how. Oh, here it is, right here. Okay. I'll just read this real quick. It says, "Is a feudal future inevitable?" And he says, "The return to feudalism is not necessarily inexorable. To change the course we are on, we first need to understand and acknowledge what is happening. We possess the advantages brought by centuries of liberal capitalism and free intellectual inquiry. We have knowledge of the past feudal era and of what democratic capitalism achieved. We do not have to be like the proverbial frog slowly boiling, unaware of its fate. Reversing the slide into a neo-feudal order will require the development of a new political paradigm." This is where we come in, obviously. It says, "The current progressive, quote, approach to social justice, quote, with its attachment to a powerful central government will only strengthen the clerisy by vesting more authority in the expert class." And for those who didn't hear our context of what the clerisy is on another podcast or whenever we talked about this, the clerisy is sort of like the academic and social media and media elite class, right? You could think of them as like the priesthood back in the feudal times. But I like that. It says the current progressive approach to social justice with its attachment to a powerful central government will only strengthen the clerisy by vesting more authority in the expert class. Are we not seeing that right now?
Yeah.
100%. Like, trust the experts, trust the science, climate change, medical stuff, all that. And this says, on the other hand, the devotees of market fundamentalism, so that's like the right, refusing to acknowledge the dangers of oligarchic power and the harm being done to the middle and working class might further a political trajectory that threatens the viability of capitalism itself, which is exactly what we're seeing. So it's like you have the people on the left who are clearly saying, fuck capitalism. But then you have the people who are the capitalists going, capitalism is the best system that's ever existed. What are you talking about? It's like, well, we're watching it fucking die before our eyes. So unless you want to solve the problems within it, like improve it. And this is part of that whole thing where we did a whole podcast on utopia. Remember our whole episode where people are like, well, you can never have an ideal world. Okay, well, then why are you complaining about people trying to fuck with what's going on right now? If you can't ever have an ideal world, stop complaining about problems. Like,
stop trying to make things better.
But this part right here, refusing to acknowledge the dangers of oligarchic power and the harm being done to the middle and working class. That oligarchic power point is so important. And we talked about this. It was on the last podcast. Remember we were talking about, and I talked about this also on my video I put on my YouTube page about, it's like Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos. These guys are the best capitalists ever. Mm-hmm. So it's so ironic when you have people who promote market fundamentalism and the markets and competition and all this, and then you talk shit about Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, and it's like, well, fuck. I mean, they did it better than you did.
Yeah.
Like, we need to have competition because that will always produce the best product. When has that ever happened? You know, it's like you get lower prices and everything. Yeah, but then what's the most perfect example of that? It's computers. The prices of computers have gone down to where like the average person can have a supercomputer by 1950s or 60s or 70s standards, right? Mm-hmm. In your hand, in your pocket. Mm-hmm. But that's how Bill Gates is so powerful. That's why Amazon is so powerful. So it's they're the winners of the competition game, right? So if we don't look at, okay, well, who's the losers and what do we need to adjust here? That all that does is empower those who are already winning to then give us the quote solutions. You see what I mean? So now it's like we have this situation moving forward where, did you guys see this thing? I think I sent it to y'all in New York, or like these bills being put forward at the state level.
Oh yeah.
Where they can basically come and arrest you and put you in detainment facilities if they see you as a health threat.
Really?
Right? Yeah.
It's really creepy just reading through that. It's like the governor or any of the governor's delegates, whoever the governor gives authority to, which would be like a health inspector or whatever, right, can come in and say, you are a threat to the health of the community. Even not like giving you a test, but being suspected of being a threat, they can detain you just for that. And that's some really scary, like dystopian shit that you'd see in like some weird movie where it's just like, yep, the state has all the power and they just pluck you out and do whatever the hell they want to you, right?
Is that Bill A416 or something like that?
I don't know what the name is. I posted
January
some-
6,
some-
2021
Probably.
is when it's going for.
Something similar to
I
that.
put it in our group chat, but
Okay.
But that's just an example of when you go into fear, you're just relinquishing all the control to the experts, to the authority, and other people will enforce it. You talk about, it's like everything they talk about Nazi Germany, all the actual negative stuff that is said about it. It's like, that's what's being implemented now by the people who spent the last 4 years calling Trump like worse than Hitler, and it's like,
It was so funny when I discovered and I posted on Facebook of the person of the year is both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, or Kamala Harris, or whatever it's called, on the front. And then you elucidated the point of Hitler and Stalin were both persons of the year. I think Stalin was twice or something like that.
Yeah.
I was like, holy shit. And why is there two people on person of the year? It was so confusing. I was like, well, it wasn't confusing.
Identify as one person.
It was just, it was just so clear. You guys ever like used to like, if you had like a brother, a sister, or a friend, like you go on each other's shoulders and pretend to be one person.
Yeah.
Like just be a giant. Right?
That's like that. You ever see that TV show, BoJack Horseman?
Yeah.
There's like a character, right, where it's like a stack of kids.
Yeah.
They wear a trench coat, right? And it's like they pretend to be like this. It's like something adult man or something like that, right?
That's hilarious.
Was that so weird when you like asked Siri like how old the president is? It would be,
And he gave the answer about Kamala Harris.
Yeah, Kamala's Harris age. That's crazy.
Dude, when I read 1984 when I was a kid,
Mhm.
I remember going like, man, it would be crazy if this was the world we lived in. And it's almost like that book is deliberately popularized and talked about in school, so you'll never think that it's just fiction.
Exactly.
It's like your first impression is that's a fictional world. That is not the real world.
That point of when you imagine what it would be like to be under control, you're like, oh, it'd be so crazy. And it would be like, oh, like we're all like freaking out and fighting back and all this stuff, or this is how it's going to look. It's like, it's never like that. And it's interesting because is it a point of you should be looking at this as if it is totally fucking crazy, or you should be looking at it as like, oh, I just imagined it wrong. And this is how it's always going to feel as things get weirder and weirder and weirder. It's always just going to feel like, oh, what the fuck? Like, this is kind of weird. But it'll just always feel like that about the next step. But then we'll be at the next step. And then they'll implement the next step. And then we'll be at that next step. And when they're like, yeah, just shoot up this like nanotechnology into your body or whatever the case may be so we can upload your, because what she's talking about in that video is really interesting. She breaks it down so simply, Catherine Austin Fitz, of how Amazon created the cloud system for like all of the branches. I think there's like 12 branches of the intelligence agencies throughout the US.
And that's not a secret. That's not that. The reason their Amazon Web Services became the cloud servers for CIA and everything. They do all of their.
And it was crazy because Malat started watching like the documentary from PBS on the rise and reign of Jeff Bezos. I don't know if you guys saw that, but it's really.
Oh no, I haven't. I should check that out. Yeah.
It's really cool. I didn't even see it all of it, but she's been watching it, and literally every company that you can think of is using that cloud. Netflix, they're like even PBS, who made this document, is using their cloud service, and so it's like. All of the data is in there. And the point that she was making is you have Mr. Global, which is, she's referring to the name of a group that is governing the world that we don't necessarily know exactly who it is. Like a small group of people. And then you have the cloud. And from the cloud, you have the humans and the robots. And what they're doing is finding a way to get the equivalent of basically an operating system inside the human being through injections and nanotechnology. She didn't say nanotechnology, but she says through injections. But she does say the equivalent of an operating system was really interesting. And then I was thinking about that. You know how the argument of, oh, they won't be able to automate my job. because I'm like a plumber or I'm an HVAC mechanic or whatever the case may be. It's like, imagine when you have cells throughout your body in your neurology, downloading that information as an operating system, every movement that you're doing, uploading that to a cloud that's being uploaded into a robot that is now replicating those functions.
That's a great point. Like, I was just watching a video yesterday about this company, about actually a whole bunch of CEOs that use this software that watches their employees. Because I think it's something like 70% of employees now work from home, something ridiculous like that.
Wow.
That's what this video was claiming. And a lot of these companies now monitor their employees at home. And they had the CEOs, they were basically asking the CEOs what they thought of it and why they wanted this software or whatever. And they were saying, well, they know they're being watched, and that's always a good thing. And it's like, if you break that down, it's like, it's good for your bottom line. That's what you mean to say. It's always good for you, not necessarily for them. But it was also a way for them to then track productivity, right? And score it and make it public. And they were saying so that you could compete against others, and it'd be like a fun game. It's like, nobody wants to do that, actually. Why you're doing that, right?
It's funny that you bring that up, because that's exactly, without the gamify portion of competing with your coworkers, like, no one gives a fuck about that.
Right.
But what apparently the way Jeff Bezos, not maybe him specifically, but the way Amazon would be run would be, they would have to work, the packers, I guess, the warehouse workers would have to work in order to meet a quota. And that quota was set that it's so inhumane they couldn't take breaks or anything. But what would happen as soon as they hit that quota?
It goes up.
Exactly. They're like, oh, you can hit that. So
Yeah.
it's just, and it just kept doing that.
Yeah.
That's fucking crazy.
Yeah. And so within that as well, they monitor literally everything. Like, they've got you on camera. They're monitoring where your mouse goes. They're monitoring the keystrokes, literally everything that you're doing on their work computer or whatever, every website, everything. And they can easily then just take all of that information, since it's from hundreds or thousands of different users, all applied to their business. They can just take that information and start feeding it to an AI of like, this is how this job is done. And so they're basically just aggregating all of that information to the point where they can just go, oh, okay, we don't need you anymore.
Right.
In fact, we don't need all 100 of you anymore.
You know that point you were talking about with where this person in that video we were talking about, she was talking about the operating system and uploading an operating system, all that. I saw a tweet from Elon Musk. I was trying to find it while we were talking. I can't find the specific one that I had seen. It was sometime in December. I found one that's from November, but it's definitely not the one I was looking for. But he was talking about mRNA, which is just messenger RNA. It's like the RNA that can change the DNA code of a.
It's the basically the genetic information that's used to create the cells of your body.
Right. So it's part of the whole replication process and everything. But the whole point of why they're using it for the vaccine is so they can teach your cells about the antibody or the spike proteins and all this other stuff about the virus, apparently, right? But he had made this tweet, and I wish I could find it. But he was saying how he kind of made this point, like, our bodies have the ability to use mRNA to change our genetics. So it was like he was saying something about it being sort of like nature does this through evolution, so why can't we do it? So he was very clearly saying we can upgrade and change the DNA of human beings using mRNAs. And then in July, he bought a company called CureVac, which is specifically to create vaccines and cures for other things out of mRNA, vaccines and so forth, right? He was saying that you'll eventually be able to cure all diseases through these mRNA vaccines and other things as well, like not just cures, right? So to your point about when she was saying, oh, they're trying to upload an operating system, people look at that and they go, oh, that sounds a little bit crazy or whatever. It's like, no, that's what they're saying they're doing. What is an operating system? I mean, your DNA is your operating system, is it not?
Right.
right? It's how your body knows what to produce, what it can't produce. Um, it your skin color, your hair length, like your eye color, your everything about you is your DNA. That is your operating system, right?
That's
And then
cool.
think about it. They talk about 90 something percent of the DNA is junk,
Huh.
which just means they don't know what it does. It doesn't encode for protein specifically for amino acids. So they don't know what that part is, you know? And it's like, do you guys ever hear these genetic algorithms? Right. So they designed these AIs where, or, you know, artificial intelligence software where it would learn how to create new software. Right.
Mhm.
So the software itself could create software.
Like GPT-3, they said, create me an app that kind of like you can scroll through pictures and you can like people's pictures, and it created like a replica of Instagram almost.
Right. Now, I don't know if this was GPT-3, if it follows genetic algorithms or not. I don't know the details behind it, but genetic algorithm is just basically it's a selection process where they kind of train it over time and select the AI and then keep like allowing it to replicate and adjust itself and everything. So it's more like an evolutionary process.
Cool.
But what was interesting about it, the significant point was that they would say, you know, they were trying to create a solution for some particular problem, you know, some kind of software. And the genetic algorithm would come up with a solution and it would work. And then they would go and look at the code that the algorithm came up with. And the engineers couldn't understand how the code
Wow.
did that thing.
Wow.
It was like there'd be entire sections that seemed totally irrelevant, totally redundant, unnecessary, didn't even make sense. And yet it would be able to do the thing they wanted to do, right? So they couldn't even understand what it was doing. And this is kind of part of, you know, what Elon Musk and OpenAI and all that stuff is about. You know, what's that guy, Nick Bogstrom or whatever his name is? He wrote that paper from Oxford about AI being an existential threat. But this is part of that whole thing of AI will become so advanced that we won't, it's not that it's more advanced than humans, it's just we won't understand it anymore.
Right.
It'll go beyond what we can understand, like what the hell is it doing? You know, it's like becoming like a foreign language or something alien to us, right? But and I think that's part of the reason why, you know, he's doing Neuralink and all that, Elon Musk, because he wants to be able to make sure we don't lose control of or ability to communicate with AI or whatever it is.
That's so interesting, because I was just looking at a student's textbook last week, right? And just looking through the textbook, it was, you know, an AP biology class. And I'm reading through it and I'm going like, oh, there's some things in here that I don't know yet, right? And so I'm looking at the student and I'm like, you don't get this, do you? Because I know if there are some things in there that I don't know, then there's definitely things that they don't know. There's a way more, right? And that's what he was saying. He was like, dude, I have no idea what we're even reading, right? And I just found it really interesting that that's what we're getting in high school, right? There's a whole bunch of things that there's no way they can expect you to understand that. Now that I have the understanding of like how to actually acquire information and you know, what's behind actually understanding and everything, looking at that is like, oh, this is like almost purposely done. They know you don't get this. They know you're never going to actually understand this. It's just like word vomit almost, and seeing who can just memorize it and regurgitate it, right? And so when you're saying like there's all this information that the engineers don't even understand, like they couldn't even go back and look at that code, and or the same way with genetics, I can completely see that. And I can see why when AI is going to get to a certain point where we can't understand it as well, especially because right now, most people cannot understand just what we already, quote, know of biology. You know what I mean? Like there's all this information out there right now that's available to the public. For instance, like we're talking about mRNA. How many people actually know what mRNA is, or even especially viruses, right? It's like, I remember on a previous podcast, we had mentioned there's a company out there that they have a website and everything. Like you can actually, you know, go to their website, make an order for your future children, you know, the genetics that you want them to have, the things that you want
Crazy.
Yeah, in their DNA, right? And one of the things that they offer is a virus. They offer putting a virus into that child or that DNA in order to make the changes or the upgrades or whatever it is that you want for that future child, right? And it's like, how many people just gloss over that? How many people actually understand what's going on? Even the people who are paying for it, they're just like, yeah, I want them to be tall, you know?
Future upgrades, I'm in.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh man, that's really
But without all of that understanding, it's difficult to get people to make the right choice, make the right decisions. I think that's just like incredibly important, is not just, as we've said before many times, it's not just waking people up so that, oh, look, there's this person doing this terrible thing, or this group or cabal or whatever doing this thing that they're going to come get you. It's like, okay, but how are they able to get to that point in the first place? Right? They're able to manipulate, able to suggest things and get you to go along with what they're doing because they know you can't understand it. Right? And so even if everyone were like to, quote, wake up to their game right now in this moment, they could easily just go, okay, but you don't know this other thing. And then we'd go right back into it. Right?
And that's that point that that book is pointing out with the clerisy, or what technocracy is. If you look up technocracy, off the word itself, you would think it's like, oh, it's like when technology is ruling everything. But it's more specific than that. It's referring to the people who are making decisions. It's based off their expertise and their science, the scientific research and things like that. Where,
Meaning it's the rulers are those who have scientific credentials.
Exactly.
So it's not really using technology to make the world better, which is what I think you're saying is what it sounds like to most people. It's literally Dr. Fauci has this degree, so he should make the decisions about whether we can go outside or not, versus an elected politician or some other particular mode of deciding that. Right.
And the reason that's interesting is like, okay, so we've noticed the stark decline in education and reading ability over the last 40, 50, 100 years, where there's a book that you recommended one time called like Common Sense or something like that from some guy. I don't remember, Cameron.
Yeah, Thomas Paine.
Yeah, right.
We learn about him in American school, but no one's ever read it because it's like super high dense vocabulary.
And before it was like a standard in grade school.
Well, no, it was like a bestseller back in the day. Yeah.
And it's like, there's been different, the way they've changed the SATs to compensate for us not being as effective education wise. It's like, let's not up the people. Let's just down the testing. Right. It's like so
always manipulated. Everything. Right. It's like with the COVID testing and everything, the fucking election results, everything is always, what's the result we want? Let's just make it look that way or make it look acceptable. It's never about giving people actual freedom, because the elite don't know how to do that anyways. And now we're at a point where there's enough technology, and they talked about this in that video we were referencing, where the technology is getting to where you can replace enough people so that the elite, like the Jeff Bezos type people, they don't need a lot of people anymore. I'm not saying it's there yet. I'm just saying it's moving towards that point. And so, I was thinking about this. I don't know if we mentioned this before, but you always hear about the elite are all about depopulation, and it's like, why does that make sense? And I was looking at this the other day, because the argument is that, because there's too many people on the planet, right? But we know that's not true. In terms of the amount of land there is and the amount of land that actually has people on it, there's not too many people. Just for example, like we looked it up, you can have everybody it could be in Australia with half an acre of land. Just in terms of the size of things, right? But a point that I kind of realized in terms of formulating it or articulating it rather from that Catherine Austin Fitts video is it's not that there's too many people, which we know is not true. It's that it's too many people for the elite to control. It's too many people for the elite to control where the people won't rebel. And remember you posted that quote from Katie the other day that she was saying in our group, right? What was it? Control always leads to rebellion.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the whole point is society has always from the very beginning been controlled rather than each person has individual self-responsibility. And you can't just go, well, if everybody would just wake up and realize that, because if everybody had the ability right now to be self-responsible, that would happen naturally. That would happen naturally. But the fact that it isn't proves that they don't have the ability. And this is kind of going into the point where people really need to understand this. Human beings are programmed. Most of the time people hear that, they're like, oh, that's a terrible thing. We shouldn't be programmed. I'm going to not be programmed. People think like, oh, I've escaped the matrix. I'm not programmed, or I've removed my brainwashing or whatever. That's like saying I have a really awesome computer because it's not programmed. It's like, what is it? It doesn't do anything then. That's literally just a piece of plastic, it's not going to do anything. It has to be programmed. The way reality works right now, everything runs on programs. I mean, look at a tree. When you have a seed, you ever looked at a seed? Like take a seed and cut it in half and look at it. You're like, how the fuck does that become a tree? It just looks like just this little thing, like it's all the same thing.
How's that going to produce apples? Yeah.
Right. Like, how is this little thing changing into something? What is this? But it's got genetic code in it. That's a program. And that code unfolds and it causes the cells to change and differentiate themselves and so forth. Right. Everything is run on a program. Children are programmed. It's just a matter of whether their programming is best or not, And if we live in a world where now, like you were talking about Drake, I've seen that too in the past with students where we're like going over biology and they're talking about biology, like genetic tests and experiments. And I'm like, I never learned about that in school. And it's because it literally came out 2 years prior to the textbook being written. So when we went through high school, that didn't even exist. That wasn't even available, So in other words, we live in a world now where we have access to like so much information. You could go on YouTube and spend the next 5 years watching videos just on biology.
Yeah.
So how do you process all of that? You can't, because from the very beginning of our formative time on this planet, we're not supported to develop our full potential of processing information. And so what happens is, some people through genetic bloodlines and so forth have a little bit higher processing ability, a little bit more open ability to learn. So they accumulate knowledge a little bit faster. So it looks to us like they're way above everybody else. And those people end up controlling everybody else, because it's like when you go to the Olympics, how much of an advantage is a 1% advantage?
It's huge.
That's the difference between not even placing and like gold,
Yeah.
When you look at the percentages. So the percentage difference between the elite of this world and everybody else is not that much. It's like they still shit. If they were so superior, they'd just be floating around like fucking magical, like energy beings. And that's not what's happening. They're just human beings, have a little bit higher vocabulary and ability to process what's going on in this world. They take a higher level of responsibility. Everybody else is so dumbed down because they were never supported to develop the vocabulary and the ability to process information at that higher level. So what choice do they have? Okay, what's there for me? What job can be given to me? So this whole idea we were talking about earlier of, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, everybody has the same opportunity. They don't. It's like, that'd be like saying if I gave 100 different people an IQ test and I'm like, you all had the same opportunity to get the highest score. Well, where does your IQ come from? It's not like it's your own personal choice.
Yeah.
In the context of how things normally, what normally determines your intellect, right? Any more than it is to say that everybody has the same equal opportunity to be a gold medalist in the Olympics.
Right.
Like, think about that. Isn't if you think about it, running a business, competing in the marketplace, how is that different that much fundamentally than being in the Olympics? You're at a level where to be at the top, you have to be like compared to what the average person is. Like, just think about the average person who like runs and jogs and stuff during the day versus like Usain Bolt. You know what I mean? The difference is they look like they're not even the same species. You see what I'm saying? They're just totally different things. So the level of someone like a Bill Gates in business versus the average person who runs a restaurant. You know what I mean? There's a totally different level. So to say everybody has the same opportunity, well, when you get to Bill Gates's level, do your decisions affect everybody else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he and his friends can shut down all the fucking restaurants.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like, what if Jeff Bezos says we want to open up a new chain of Amazon restaurants? They're touchless restaurants. There's no human beings inside. Everything's delivered. Da 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 da. And you're like, oh, but come on, everybody has the same opportunity to compete.
No.
Really?
It's
Because
like, yeah, but a full meal there costs $5.
right, but also he controls the Washington Post.
Right.
He has all the cloud servers. So if they want to shut down somebody saying, well, I don't agree with what they're doing, you're shut down. His friends run Twitter. His friends run Facebook. And you want to say everyone has an equal opportunity to compete. Do you remember that video Kamala Harris posted on her Twitter like the day
It's
before
about
the election?
equity, not equality. That one?
But even more specifically, she said, it's about giving people the
Equal
resources
opportunity.
to compete on an even playing field.
Say it again, just because I might have cut it off.
It's about giving people the resources to compete on an equal or even playing field.
Where it's like, you remember the visuals? It's like they're climbing this mountain and they reach to the same spot.
Right. But those are just two individual human beings. So now let's look at it in the context of the lockdown that's happened. What would the equity response be in that situation? They should also shut down Amazon. They should also shut down Walmart. They should also shut down all those things, but they won't because they're lying. Remember we were talking about Max telling me about I was lying? That's an act. They're actually lying. They're not just incorrect. They're lying. They know they're lying. And politicians are very good at telling you something and lying.
You know what's funny? What I just realized? It's like no one processes this because they already feel as if, like unconsciously, okay? Because I know this inside of myself. It's like when you watch that video, you're not thinking of you and Jeff Bezos. You're not thinking of you and Walmart. You're thinking of you and your other ethnic friend. It's like you categorize yourself as a different class than the clerisy already.
Yeah.
So that's why when you watch that video, it's like, cool, nice, quality or equity. Sorry. They're not even like, we're programmed to not even consider that we're on the that the rules should apply to those guys.
I like how they're saying equity. And she said it's not about equality.
Yeah.
It's like, because we've taken over what equality actually means.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like what Bernard did, Destiny and so forth. We've defined equality as what it actually is. So it's like, they can't say it's about equality anymore because equality, imagine you're an AI and you're on the internet and you're looking at equality and you're going to get access to Destiny. You're going to get access to self-perfected, everything we're talking about. So if people are going down that route, equality is actually what's best for all. Equity is a financial term. You know what I mean? It's like a justice term. It's about finance. It's about seeing everything as money, and as numbers. But equality would be, okay, do you give the same amount of water to a tree as you give a flower?
No.
You don't. But do you look at different flowers and say, well, that one's prettier and that one's ugly, so I'm not going to give them the same amount of water?
No.
No, you should be looking at, okay, what's the actual effect in reality? You see what I mean? What is the actual effect in reality if we do this or we don't do this? So equality is looking at what is everything actually equal to. That's a dimension of it anyways. Do you see what I mean? Like, what is this tree actually representing? What is it producing in this world? What does it need? What is its form? Understanding it. But in our current political economic systems, that's not how things are looked at all. So when we talk about redefining money, we're saying, what is the actual value? What should it's hard for people, I think, to think like this. So I just want to kind of open it up a little bit.
Mhm.
What should be the purpose of money?
To support life.
Right?
What does that mean?
Meaning, okay, let's put it this way.
Meaning, what is it for right now? How is it?
Like,
not?
let's say I was going to build a building right now, right? And I was like, okay, I'm going to put this building right here. Generally speaking, currently, what would be the major considerations? In fact, the only considerations that a person would consider within building that building.
How much is it going to cost?
What's it going to cost and what's the profit going to be?
Yeah.
And that's it. There's no consideration of what's the environmental effect? How does it affect people nearby, plants, wildlife, flowers, trees, air quality? Like, there's no consideration whatsoever of that at all. So it's not a principled decision. And someone might say, well, but yeah, you can't compete in the system if you think like that. I agree. That's why we're saying those rules have to change. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because in the system that we have, it's all based on survival of the fittest. It's all based on fear. It's all based on control. It's all based on lack and limitation. So it's like, if I don't dominate and win, I will lose. But what if we just had a baseline reality where no one ever lost? From the perspective that no one ever lost, and therefore the consequence is you don't have enough food.
Yeah.
You don't have an effective education to where you can't process information, or to where you develop emotional instability.
You don't have shelter.
Yeah, to where you lost, therefore you were sexually abused.
Hmm.
You don't have shelter, exactly. You don't have clothing. You don't have ability to express yourself, communicate.
But wait, Cam, are you saying that everyone should just get a participation trophy?
Right. And see, I know that's exactly where a person's mind would go, isn't it?
Right.
When I say no one should lose, they're like, oh, that's the whole problem with this generation. You guys think that you should just get participation trophies
Titled
and so forth.
snowflakes. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, let me ask you a question. What's the purpose of a participation trophy?
So that no one feels like they've been left out.
Right. Who gives a fuck about your feelings about it?
Yeah.
Like what value, what function, like what practical function?
Right. What I'm talking about is, if a person grows up and they don't have enough food every night consistently, that's not a participation trophy.
Right.
That's actual losing.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? And so what happens is, so you have two kinds of people. A person who's in that situation, grew up with that. I guess three. A person who grew up in that situation, knows what it's like to be on that side, is still unsuccessful in the system,
mm-hmm.
and hopes that someday they can
make it,
have a better life. But relatively speaking, they're actually comfortable, even though they wouldn't say that. They wouldn't admit that. But they are compared to the vast majority of people. But just, we have a higher standard of living in the United States, let's say.
Yeah.
Then you have people who, of course, I'm not even talking about the people who grow up in abject poverty and, like in the red light district in fucking India or something, where you're like the child of some fucking prostitute who sleeps with 30 guys a month or whatever, a day or whatever it is, right? I'm not talking about those kids. I'm talking about a kid growing up, he just didn't have enough. And then you have the people who were in that situation and got out of it. But what they ended up doing was becoming abusers. Abusers from the perspective of, they had to find some way to be successful in the current system. How do you become successful in the current system?
Have to abuse.
You have to, because let's say you're Jeff Bezos, right? Just as an example, because he's so successful in the system, right? And people say, but he's created so many jobs. Okay, do you know what the average Amazon worker's job is like?
It's not pretty.
It's not pretty. It's like insane. They get burnt out. Even at the top levels, they get burnt out, like the executives and so forth. They only last a few years because it's so much demanded of them. Jeff Bezos basically, yeah, he just like sucks your soul. I'm not judging him. I mean, I am, but what I'm saying is I'm not singling him out.
Yeah.
A lot of people like to single him. I'm saying that's no different than a restaurant owner sucking the life out of their fucking waitresses and their waiters and their chefs. And it's not singling them out. It's like, this is the nature of our system. It's not that person is bad, which some people would go into, oh, you're just saying that person's bad. No, it's like, this is my point exactly, is the way our system is set up. Everyone has to do that, or else you're the one that's getting your life sucked out of you. Either you're the winner or you're the loser. But then at the end of the
so
day,
you're trying to say that everybody's abusive.
Right.
Everybody who does everything is abusers.
everyone's abusive. And then you have the people who are just here and they can't do anything about it. Right? They're abusive indirectly. So it doesn't mean like everyone's always going around with the intention of trying to abuse, like it's a conscious thought on your mind. Right? That's not what I'm trying to say. But it's by accepting a system that requires abuse.
Exactly.
There can only be one Jeff Bezos in that whole picture. And then there's like the investors, and there's a lot of people who are benefiting from that. Right? And of course, you can go into this whole thing of like, but he works so hard and he creates so many jobs and he adds value to society and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, isn't his goal right now to replace all his workers with robots? Don't you think if Jeff Bezos could, he would just have like maybe 5 people who are like his people who run software and AI and robots?
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
If he could, he would have a robot that runs all his robots. If he could.
That is what they're working on. That
Yeah.
is what they're all doing. Everything they're doing is towards the point of automation. That's why the lockdowns are happening. Like, that video we were talking about, it really puts a lot of this together to see how all these different things that are going on, they're all connected from the perspective of just moving society to the point that we've been talking about for many years. I would say a decade now, but it's been like almost 8 years now with TechnoTutor talking about these points of this is inevitably what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Are you prepared? Are your children prepared? Is your community prepared? And then 2020 comes along and it's like proof no one's prepared. Right? And what do you think's happening during this whole lockdown? All they're doing is upgrading all the systems. Because it was like, do you guys remember in the beginning of the pandemic and like in the middle, there was this period where it was really difficult to send mail across the border?
Yeah.
Right? But then you guys are just going back into lockdown in Canada,
Yeah.
right? And but there's still no problem sending mail.
You know, it's funny, actually. It was, I didn't put any significance to it. I still don't really do it, but I just think the customs form, normally you would go there, you would have to write the person's information on the package and you would have to fill out a customs form and put that on the package.
Mhm.
You don't have to do that anymore. As of the 26th, which is the same day I went back into lockdown, but I think that's irrelevant, but it's all online now.
Right. So what they did was they just upgraded all of that.
Yeah.
They're like, well, we live in a pandemic world now. It's not like things ever go back.
Hmm.
Same thing with the masks with, and it's like, man, we should, if you look at when we started these videos, because it was like right at the beginning of all this, it's kind of what it gave us the impetus to really start doing all this. Right.
Mhm.
But stuff that even back then we were saying, look, this is clearly what's going to happen, and you can see a lot of people online were like, not necessarily directly talking to us, but saying the things that we were pointing out. If other people said it, like, oh, that's crazy. Like this whole, they're just going to everyone's gonna be wearing the masks forever. Right. Yeah. And people are like, oh, come on. Like, why is it such an inconvenience just for a few weeks? Like, quit making a big deal about it. Right. And you're like, it's already 2020, 21 and people are still doing it.
Yeah.
And what I said in the very beginning is I was like, do you guys think this is the last virus that's ever going to occur? So if we're willing to go to these links to this for this thing, why would it ever go back to normal? Like, isn't there going to be another virus? Like, isn't that just happens every year? There's always another one.
Yeah.
So, and then even this, it's like, what if this was the most severe one that's ever going to happen? Well, but how would you know that? So anytime anybody would get sick, wouldn't you be like, well, let's just assume it could be the next like 2.0 and let's just make sure we lock everything down and all that. So, and then you give the government that power to do that. Why would they ever relinquish it?
You know what it reminds me of is like, there used to be all these movies where there'd be some kind of like nuclear fallout or like the threat of a nuclear fallout, and people would have these bunkers that they would go and live underground.
The bunkers. Yeah.
Right. And then it's almost as if right now everyone is living under their bunker, right? And everyone's living underground, and this has become the new normal. Kids are being born underground, all that. And it's like, well, is it safe to go out yet? I don't know. Let's just stay in the bunker. And
wow,
you never know when it's gonna like.
Do you guys know any movies? I played a video game where the entire city is underground. Like underground, they don't see the sky anymore.
Yeah.
Like this whole video game is called Breath of Fire Dragon Quarter, and the whole thing is like it's actually pretty wacky. It's like one of those anime, like more like weirder games, but it's RPG, right? And I think it was originally supposed to be just for Japan. It got moved over to the West, and
To prepare everybody for
right. It's actually because the thing is like you're the main character. You have the sword, right? Whatever, and you're underground. You're a grunt worker, so it's like, you know, life is just you just do your thing, right? And then you go to this lab because you're supposed to transport something, but the thing crashes, and then you're like, oh shit, I gotta find my way. And you find yourself in this lab, and you find this girl that they were doing testing on, and you're like, whoa, this is fucked up. I gotta save her. And it turns out she's like not really human. She has like wings.
okay.
But basically the point is the whole premise of it is you got to get her to the sky because if she doesn't breathe air, like if she doesn't get air, she's going to die. And I I've seen movies, video games, a bunch of things about like you don't see the sky.
Hmm.
It was just so interesting the way you describe people living in their houses as being in the bunkers, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Right? That's really
Have you
interesting.
guys ever seen Surrogates?
No,
No.
No.
I think I heard about it.
I'm not sure when it came out. It's not a brand new movie. But it's not old. I would say it was
Isn't it kind of spooky, like kind of weird?
probably like 6 years ago. No, it's like a sci-fi movie, right? And it's got
Is that the one with Benedict?
Bruce Willis.
Oh.
Pretty sure, I'm pretty sure it has Bruce Willis, but he's some kind of detective. But the point is, people they live in their homes. They don't ever. It's like they have chairs that are kind of like, you know, like a pod sort of a thing,
Uh-huh.
and you're hooked up to a computer, and then you have a robot that you're like jacked into that you experience everything through, and your robot is what goes out into the world and experiences reality.
Yeah, maybe I have seen that movie. Yeah.
In a futuristic
like,
world where
And
people
you see
live
the
within-
robot and everything, and you see the person, and they're like some fat blob.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just like in their house, and like they get up and they're like walking around their house like in a zombie state, like checking the fridge, and then they get back in their thing, and then they're out there in the physical world.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like Ready Player One, I guess. But you know, it's all those kind of things combined, right?
It says in a futuristic world, people live within the safety of their homes, while their robotic surrogates carry on with day-to-day chores. This harmonious existence.
Day-to-day chores, i.e., living in reality. Like,
Right.
does it say why they're?
Nah,
Why
this
is
is just
it
like the tagline or whatever.
Oh, okay. I'm just because I saw the movie and I'm like wondering why did it get to that point? I
Mhm.
wonder because now that's totally believable that could happen.
Yeah.
Because before this, you would think, well, okay, but why would people would still go out, right? But now you can see it's the perfect reason why people would not leave their homes.
It basically says that the androids enable everyone to live in idealized forms from the safety of their homes.
You know what else is usually the case with a lot of these movies is that there will be some group of people that live above ground and another group that just stays underground, even being aware of the other people. It's like they're distrusting of that other group.
There's a movie called The Time Machine, H.G. Wells. I mean, that's a famous book, but there's also a movie it's a really cool movie. It's got that guy from Memento, Guy Ritchie, right? And he's going like traveling through time. There's one point where he goes to like, you know, almost like the end of time, basically.
Yeah.
And society has evolved where there's like the mole people basically who live underground. And then there's like the elite society who lives like literally above the ground as well.
So basically right now, everyone's making a choice of whether they're going to be mole people or the elite. Right. But even those people who are thinking that they're deciding like to live above ground, right? They're not necessarily going to be the elite. Right.
No, like the people who say, oh, I just won't wear the mask or whatever.
Right.
No. And this is kind of going to what you had brought up, Asif, or I think you brought up earlier before we started the podcast. This point people go into of kind of like a despair. It's like there's two ways of going. One is like they get so obsessed on the information, like if everyone just knew this information, everything would change. But that in itself is the point that we're saying is people can't process information.
Yeah.
How many people would you show them this information and they're like, that's crazy, that's bullshit, I don't believe it, the experts didn't say so, whatever. And they also just don't even have the time to think about it.
Yeah.
They're too focused on whatever they're doing or their life or their goals or their happiness, or just they're stressed or whatever.
Yeah.
But then you have the other group who, when you're looking at what's really going on, it's kind of like, whether you're even aware of what's really going on or you're just aware of what you're being told is going on, going into a point of despair, right? Because you don't even have to be aware to go into this despair point. You could just think, no, there's like actually a pandemic. We're all,
Right.
any one of us could die. Like, we have to lock down. You're still like thinking everything's basically fucked.
Yeah.
But even if you're awake to a certain degree and you're like, okay, no, I know what's going on here, is there enough time to change anything? Like, I would highly recommend everyone watch that Catherine Austin Fitts video. I don't know where you can find it. I saw it on Instagram.
It's
I
on
think it was on
YouTube.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s.
Maybe if you listen to this, it's taken down. I don't know, but it's called Planet Lockdown, and it's about 48 minutes, and it's basically a interview with a lady. So the thumbnail will be a lady sitting at a desk.
Yeah, but definitely watch it. And the point is, when you watch it, maybe you could bring up the point you were talking about, Asif, of like the despair point and so forth.
One thing I wanted to mention from that video, for those of you who have watched it, and just for you guys, it's really interesting because she makes this point, right? She breaks out her notebook. She has a sick notebook. I want her pen too. It's really good. High quality stuff there. She takes it, she draws the pillars. She says, I don't remember them all, but basically one of them is the media. One of them is the healthcare, right? One of them is maybe the bank system, right? So she draws like 5 of those, and she's saying and then you have like the cryptocurrency, because they're trying to implement things, right? It's all dependent on people not being able to connect the dots between how the pillars are interrelated. And it's fascinating because, so you have Chairman Powell. So he's the guy who does a lot of the Q&A for the Federal Reserve, right? And I don't remember if it was him talking and somebody else was reacting, or I think somebody else was saying something and he was like,
I think so.
Oh, hold up.
Because they brought up, what was it? They brought up something.
They had brought up the point of, and so there's like media, there's.
Oh, it's digital IDs. That's
exactly, right? There's media, healthcare, banking, and then like the digital like workers, the people who are implementing advancing technology, right? And basically the main focus, this is the point she keeps bringing up, there's about 327 million Americans, but there's over 327 million guns. And it's funny because she makes this point about how people don't understand the Second Amendment, about why would people want guns. And that was me, right? I was like, Karen, why do you keep talking about guns now, dude? Like a couple months ago. And then I started kind of researching that point for myself of like, why would that even be in the Constitution? I'd always think like, what the fuck is the point of that? Now it makes so much sense, especially in the context of everything going on. But the point is, there was somebody saying the bankers, so this pillar, the financial bankers, were intersecting or drawing a correlation potentially with their words with the technology pillar, with the digital IDs. So soon everybody will have digital IDs that link everything together. And you could see Chairman Powell, apparently from how she was describing it, going like, oh, don't do that.
Like basically don't bring that up in the context of what we're
banking,
doing.
of
Don't
this
connect
pillar.
the dots for people. Yeah.
So that's the coolest point. That's the way I explain technically to some people. It's being able to effectively put dots into yourself and then connect them to all the other dots, right? And so it just allows you to see everything more holistically, because if your life isn't working, consider it's because you can only connect these dots. But in order for your life to work in relationships, it requires all of these dots.
You have to have an effective vocabulary to do that.
Exactly. Right. That's what the dots are.
Think back to school, right?
Mm-hmm.
You were studying biology, math, maybe algebra, some kind of literature, history. Were they ever connected?
No.
It's like you're going from physically one room to another room.
Yeah.
But it's like you're studying this
enhance
subject
that.
and that subject, and there never is any crossover or any connection between them.
Yeah.
There's never any context of here's how everything is fitting together. So it's training you over time to think about things like that. And then it's not teaching you how to think about them in terms of connecting them and so forth. And there's no focus on development of vocabulary, especially in the early years where it matters the most. And so someone who can do that, I mean, what is it that separates a Jeff Bezos and a Bill Gates from everybody else?
They're able to connect those thoughts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
In fact, when you read his story about how he realized how to build Amazon in the first place, he saw, hey, there's the internet. There's this kind of, he called it the Wild West, where it's like they don't know how to tax everything. We could sell the books online and get, avoid the taxes and so forth. And then, hey, look at that. We can outcompete all the bookstores.
Not only that, he was just seeing from the perspective of the internet was growing at a rate of 2,000% per day. And he's like, well, that's here to stay. I don't care what anybody else is saying. Because they were all saying, oh, the .com crash is
right.
And he was like, no, there's something to it there, and if I could just put a business online, something that's like really practical that we all use today, then.
And that you couldn't have in the real world, he said. That was another important point.
Yeah. Well, that was already in the real world. Like, because for instance, he was looking at how Barnes and Noble didn't already have a digital store.
No, but what I meant was, one of his points was you couldn't go into a physical bookstore and say, give me any book in the world, and it just is delivered to your hands.
Oh, right.
Like, there's no bookstore like that. So it was, even though it was in the book world, it was an aspect of it that couldn't be replicated in terms of a physical retail location. So he's like, he said in his story, I knew it had to be something that you couldn't replicate from that perspective. It had to be unique. Otherwise, people would just go to the bookstore.
Right. And then, the other cool thing about that is, from him saying that, he was like, I was like 2 or 3 years ahead of the bookstores. Right. And then,
because why didn't they think of it? Exactly.
Right. And then,
but that just goes to show that the people who created the bookstores were visionaries, most likely, like, in terms of being a big retail establishment, were like a Jeff Bezos. But then you have people come in who just went to management school, and their job is to just manage it.
Yeah.
So all they're thinking about is cutting costs and so forth. They're very rarely thinking about taking it to the next level. Same thing happened to Apple when Steve Jobs left.
Yeah.
And then when he came back, suddenly it grew again. Right?
Yeah. That's the same thing that David M. Rubenstein talks about. One of the co-founders of Carlyle Group, which, if you're watching this video, you should know about Carlyle Group. But when he says, when they're looking for people to step up into those positions of actually running the company, they're not looking for managers. He's like, we're tired. We do not look for the people who have gone through the traditional schooling system necessarily, because we want entrepreneurs. And it's very hard to find a true entrepreneur from somebody who's been working a position as an employee in your company.
Right. And why would an entrepreneur want a paycheck anyways?
Exactly. So he's like, it's a conflict of interest. It doesn't make sense. But back to, like, these are all these billionaires basically saying the same thing, right? And within all of that, it's the ability to, again, connect those dots and see things just a little bit ahead. 2-3 years isn't that much, right? But it's such a huge gap in when you're talking about competition at this stage, right? The same thing with the cloud that Amazon has. He was talking about that. He was actually trying to get, I think, Google to use it, like, to look at the technology that he had and everything, and other companies, and they're like, no, we've got our own thing, And he was like, all right, well, I'm just going to keep doing this. And he got 2 or 3 years ahead of them. And that's why Amazon and not Google is why, what everything's connected to. Right.
That's actually a good point. Actually, I didn't consider that.
Yeah.
Because they monopolize the data. So if anybody were to release some kind of voice assistant now, how the fuck are they going to compete?
Right. They're so far ahead.
Yeah.
And exactly. I got an ad, I don't think it was on my Amazon or something, for a auto Echo. Echo, which is like the device that houses the Alexa or whatever, right? So it's like you put it in your car, and then you can talk to Alexa through in your car and have, I don't know why you'd want to do this. Like, I think for navigation purposes, things like that, but they're basically trying to get rid of Apple. You know what I mean? Because that's normally you would, if you're in your car, who are you going to talk to?
Apple.
Not Alexa.
Yeah.
But they're like, no, fuck that. You're going to talk to Alexa, right? So it's totally fascinating how they're trying to get into everything now. Right.
Yeah.
But this is really such a key point because, and I think that's one of the real fundamental things that differentiates us in terms of self-perfected with everything that we're bringing through from any other group out there. This is not the only point, because obviously the principles that we're standing by, that we're promoting, those things, you're not going to find that anywhere else either. But this point of, on the one side, people say, let's just control everybody. I mean, that's really what progressivism and communism and everything is about. The only way to make sure that nobody is left behind is just to control everybody. The other side is, oh no, don't control anybody, give them all freedom, let the markets decide, it's the best way. You know, Bernard has a really cool blog where he talks about there is no hidden market forces. That's a myth. I mean, think about it. Believing that there's a, you know, like, remember we learned about what they call the invisible hand, right?
Yeah.
Of the market.
Yeah.
That's literally the same as believing in God. You actually think there's an entity that's an invisible. Do you think the elite believe that?
No.
They don't believe there's some invisible market hand over. They just talk about that.
They're
So everyone
like,
else believes in it.
Let's inject a bunch of money to spike the price and sell off so everything crashes and just do something.
Or let's just like influence everybody through all these different points where nobody can say there's one definitive point that's doing it. It's like, oh, you're just brainwashing everybody to want to, you know, eat fast food hamburgers. Give me a break. It's like, what about all the advertising? What about all the athletes doing it? What about all the you know, everything? It's not like it happened by accident. Oh, it's just what the consumers wanted. Hey, it's what they wanted. Really, they want to eat 80% fucking sawdust or whatever it is. You know, I don't know what the exact number is. That's not what they wanted, right? And if they did want it back then, they didn't ask for what it is now. Right. They're constantly being impulsed and so forth, right? So you have that side, which is just total bullshit. And it's funny because aren't those people the people who are usually the most religious as well? Right? The ones who would argue like it's all about just giving everybody an opportunity and, you know, competition and all that. They're always the ones who believe they're most like religious fundamentalists as well as market fundamentalists. They kind of seem to go hand in hand in a lot of ways. But that's kind of just like let everybody figure it out for themselves. The other side is let's control everybody. And what we're saying is the elite are not evil and because they're so different from everybody, meaning like they're just inherently evil and everybody else is so good. They're just in a position where they can do something and affect other people with their human nature. Because if you were to replace anybody else in that same situation, why would they do anything differently? And if they're not in a group with principles, how could they?
Yeah.
If you take the best good, I won't say goodest, you know, the most good person on the planet and you replace Jeff Bezos with him, what happens the next day?
They're going to be corrupted.
They're either going to be corrupted or
you're not going to get your packages anymore.
Or Google's going to be like, oh, thank you. You know, like they're fucked. You know what I mean?
They're going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe how we're treating these workers. Like, this is awful.
Right, exactly. And then suddenly, like you said,
no more next day.
That day.
No more next day shipping.
It's like game over, right? But what we're saying is, okay, the only solution here is we have to bring everybody up. I'm not saying immediately everyone's going to be at the level of Jeff Bezos. Okay. What I'm saying is at least to a point where you can connect the dots. Because part of the thing everybody says is if everyone could just see, then they wouldn't allow it. I agree. Like, how are they getting away with election fraud in all the years that they've done it since not even just the last election, every time? Because people just, they don't connect it. They don't go, oh yeah, holy fuck. You know? And then when it comes time for election day, they're just like, yeah, look it.
By the last election, we're talking about the 2016 election.
The whole fucking time talking about how it was corrupted and everything. And then you're not allowed to talk about their
This is going on YouTube, so we can only talk about the 2016 election, Cameron.
Oh yeah. We were only talking about 2016. I never said which election. When I said the last one, I just meant the last one.
You just got confused.
The last one that was stolen by Trump, of course. Right? but we all know Trump stole the 2016 election, and we all know you can't steal elections. That's not
No,
possible.
election fraud is very rare. That's what Twitter tells me.
Yeah, it is very rare. It happened in 2016, and but also it never happens. So we know that. We know these two things simultaneously. We are the inner party. All right. So, but I guess my point is, it's about.
You know what the lady says? You know what Catherine Austin Fitch says? She says, I'm not denying that maybe people are dying from a virus because I don't want to undermine the leadership's ability to
People
put
die
a
from
virus
viruses.
into the population.
Yeah, but also people die from viruses.
Yeah. No, what she says is
that's because it's attacking the weaknesses within you. Okay, that's like always been happening since human existence.
What Catherine Fitz says is, if you just look at it from a perspective of time and money, and you just look at the timing of things and watch the cash flow, she says I couldn't imagine how anybody could believe that this is real. She says, then she's talking about the points of like AI and robotics and all that stuff. And I'm like, whoa, like I'd never thought about this. She's like, oh yeah, there's nobody in my circle that doesn't understand that.
Right.
I'm like, But it's just, go ahead.
That kind of makes me think of like, you ever go like paintball shooting? Like,
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun, right? But like one of the first things you do, if you're really into it and you've got a strategy and everything, one of the first things you do is you lay down like a suppressing fire as soon as the game starts, so that wherever that opposite team is coming from, you can keep them holed up or at least restrict their movements, right?
Damn, I didn't play it that hard. That's crazy.
The way I'm thinking about it is like there is a suppressing fire coming, right? Or here rather, right? But if you stay holed up, you're not even in the game.
Nice.
You have to take a risk and go out, and potentially you might get hit. It might be you. But if the whole team stays holed up, it's like you're not winning. You're done.
Like imagine that was your whole experience of paintball. You just stayed at the home base and you're like, please nobody shoot me.
Yeah. Yeah. You could be afraid of getting a welt. It hurts for sure. For sure. You could die. Not in paintball, but like.
And like, let's say you stay at home and you're just going to do everything online because you got all these people doing whatever number of online businesses, right? How long is it going to be? Just really ask yourself. I'm not trying to persuade you. Just ask yourself, how long is it going to be before what you're doing is automated and you're locked out of it? Like where you can't control it. And if let's say you're an influencer, how long is it before you're not allowed to have some of the opinions that you have?
Which we're already seeing.
Seeing it.
With the new rules,
Right. So at a certain point, if you want to be able to express yourself and you've only built something through online, you have nothing anymore. And if you've consented to just everyone being at home and doing everything through this, I mean, really look at it. The masks. I was thinking about this. I think you experience this too, Drake, right? Where you work with a wealthy clientele, right? Mm-hmm. And you get to go to like Christmas parties, for example, right? Mm-hmm. So I you go to these Christmas parties, like we don't do that kind of stuff ourselves. We're very specific about, who comes into our environment with our kids, but we've been to Christmas parties. Everyone does these things, right?
Yeah.
Do you think those are going to exist anymore?
What?
Now think about it.
I think I was just thinking this as you were talking. Like, we're going to have to become influencers on a completely different level, not on the level of like reaching millions of people through a broadcast and things like that, but influencers on the level of, I've really helped this group of people, this individual person, let's say, let's go on the micro, right? I've really helped this individual person so much. And then I can just tell them, hey, other people that need this, right? And they're like, yes. And they're so influenced because of the results, the changes, the good that it's done them, the benefits that they've gotten, that they're like, hey, you really have to talk. And it's just like an underground kind of name that's like, everyone knows this underground name. Everyone knows that's what I've been trying to get to, you know, because they can see, oh yes, that's real life. And the reason why I was thinking about this is because you look at other people who have been banned from social media, like an Owen Benjamin or, you know, whoever, right? Alex Jones. You look at like people like that who have been banned. They've been banned not just from YouTube or Instagram or Facebook, but they've been banned literally from like Patreon, literally from, you know, Airbnb, like things that you wouldn't even expect that you'd get banned from.
True.
Right. But, and so I was thinking, if you keep your presence like through Zoom, it's very specific, and it's a one-on-one, then you can really direct that in a way where you can make a huge difference without being slammed down by the system.
You know, it's funny because I can imagine if people were just they had an Instagram following or they had a TikTok following or Facebook following, navigating to in person would be like, oh shit, I never really done that before.
Well, also everything they've been doing was a lie.
Right.
They have nothing.
Exactly. It's like an image.
All you were doing was pretending, and then you're really good at making something look really good.
Mhm.
But no one actually wants to spend time with you. No one sees any actual value in what you're doing or saying. They're just jealous of your lifestyle.
Right.
You know, that's all it is. But how long before there's someone better and there's only one or two? Because it's too much of a risk to allow them to be anybody can influence and have that moment where they might influence a lot of people with something before they get shut down.
Right.
And people will beg for this. They'll beg for that to happen, that we regulate all this stuff. Just like I saw on Nextdoor app, I get these like update emails of like, you know, the best of, and somebody in our neighborhood, or I guess our surrounding neighborhood, was like complaining about the one of the grocery stores called Kroger here, right? They were like, I went to Kroger yesterday and they have signs that say you have to wear a mask, but there were people in there without masks and they were not enforcing it. And people were like, that is so terrible, you should complain. And they were like, well, I go to Randall's, they make everyone wear a mask, they won't even let you come in. I'm like, okay, great. And I'm like, holy fuck.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, cool, thanks, I can go to Kroger. You know, like,
yeah. Same shit happens here. Same shit. I see
you
the
know,
same messages. Yeah.
People will, and they'll think they're justified. They will believe that they're justified. They're not connecting the dots. But why not? Because they're just afraid. They are afraid. They won't even leave their house. They won't talk to anybody. They won't let anybody come into their home. Right? Because they're afraid. Yeah. They don't even care if it's true. And if you try to talk to them, I mean, maybe there's some people you can get through to. I'm not saying there's no one, but there will be people who they are choosing to be afraid.
Yeah.
They like that feeling.
It was just a cool point that you made, Drake, about how it's going to become, you're not influencing hundreds of people or anything. You're influencing a household.
You're still influencing hundreds of people. I want to correct what I said. Like, you're still influencing a ton of people.
Mm-hmm. But it's just
going
to
be not trying to do it all at once.
Just not broadcasting all at once. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, you know, this, I think this is, you just look at how things connect. Trump won because he could do that. He could influence a lot of people at once. He could do it online. They had a massive digital marketing team, right? And he was able to have rallies with 50,000 plus people.
Yeah.
And why was virtually anybody online, anyways, in terms of, you know, you always see two sides of things, right? But how many people were at Joe Biden's rallies?
5.
Prior to the pandemic.
Yeah.
None. So they're like, oh, it was just because the pandemic. This was before too. Nobody was fucking showing up.
Yeah.
Right. He was just getting into arguments with small groups of people. Like, that's all that was happening. right? But he had that skill to influence masses of people. And so it's like the elite, they learned, okay, we got to shut that ability down. And I'm not saying it's not still a possibility to do something like that, but how are you going to have a stadium full of people and say what you want to say unless you own the stadium?
Yeah.
Unless you own the land that it's on.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless you also have somebody in the government who's like, I'm not going to impose this bullshit.
Yeah.
So when we talk about despair, the reason why people go into despair is, you made this point. We've talked about this before, right, Asif, where you'll believe the world can change to the degree that you know that you can change, or that you realize you can change, or that you're certain you can change. And so you'll go into despair to the degree that within yourself, at least at this point, the level of the decision you've made, that you're not going to stand up and do anything.
Ooh.
You're not. And what does it mean to do something? It doesn't mean to go protest. That does nothing. I'm not saying you can't go to a protest and talk to people, but just going there to protest, it's such a silly thing to me. It's like yelling at the people who are deliberately lying to your face and controlling you, and yelling at them like, don't you know what you're doing is wrong? They're like, yeah, so what? Oh, you're protesting. Okay, we'll change it. And people don't protest unless they're motivated and impulse to do it anyways. Nothing ever changes from protests.
Let me ask you this. So I was talking to David, and he's mentioned a point of, I think it was across Canada, only 40% of people would willingly take the vaccine up front. Something like that, approximate number. I know in Ontario it's a little bit higher. It's like 60 or 70%. Somebody was making a point of, if collectively we're like, yeah, we're not fucking doing that, the political pressure of that, I think it happened somewhere where, I think it was in one of the states where there was just a bunch of business owners who were like, fuck that. We're not doing it. And then there was pushback in that regard where it's like, okay, you can open. They're telling them to shut it down, and they're saying, we're not shutting down. We're going to keep going. They were like, okay, fine. But you have to, I don't know, social distance or wear the mask or something.
But do those people still have some level of fear within them about something? And they're all on Facebook. They're all on Instagram. They're all on their computers. Eventually, the elite will find what it is. And they'll get those people too.
Holy shit, dude. Wow.
And at the end of the day, even if they say we're not going to shut down, eventually Amazon's going to get so effective at delivering food and undercutting prices, those people won't be able to survive anymore. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying they shouldn't stand up for themselves and say, hey, this is our livelihood. I'm not saying that. That's not protesting. Do you see what I'm saying? Saying I'm not going to do something you're telling me to do that is harmful to me is not the same thing as protesting. Protesting is going out to the street and yelling and acting like that's going to change something and being like, okay, cool, I protested.
Yeah.
The protests are cool from a certain perspective when they show like there's public support for something, but not if no one covers it. How do you even know about it? In Canada, you probably don't even know most of the stuff that happens here and vice versa. So you don't even know really what's going on. It's all the information's being controlled. So that's why it has to be. I mean, while things are open and available, we have to use them, just like we're doing right now. We have this podcast, right? But I mean, eventually it'll get shut down too, as will the vast majority of all other podcasts as well. It's not just ours, But the point about despair is like, what are you going to do? Are you going to stand up within yourself? You can't stand up to the system like, oh, I'm going to stand up to you. It's about standing up within yourself. Like, do you think Jeff Bezos goes, who am I to influence so many people? Do you see what I mean? But the average person will say they'll believe they're not important. They'll believe there's nothing they can do. That's called low self-esteem. You don't think that you can do anything. You don't think that you have the right to do it. Jeff Bezos doesn't think like that. It's not about becoming a celebrity. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah, if you have that within you and you can do it, then great. And then stand up for what's best. But that's not what I'm talking about, is becoming a celebrity, like we were saying, where you're influencing millions of people at a time. that really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, let's say you had 1 million people and you're talking to 1 million people. What would you tell them to do? Are you going to walk them through the process individually of changing themselves within on a daily basis through that medium? Could you impulse them and influence them to walk that process? Yeah, absolutely. So that's what I'm saying. Don't just throw it out and be like, don't do it. But what I'm saying is that's not what I'm suggesting people do as the primary thing.
Mhm.
It's about becoming influential within your sphere of influence where you have around you. Because who else in your environment is influencing the people that you have access to actually change within themselves, adjust their starting point within why they're here? It's like if everybody is living from the starting point of it's just all about me. I was talking to someone the other day. We were talking about, I think it was your brother actually, as if I was talking to Kian, and he was asking me,
He's
not
pretty
because
cool.
he wanted to, he's not because he wanted to, he was just asking my perspective, like, do I drink? Not because he was like asking for permission. He was just saying,
He's like, dude, should I drink? Do you drink?
yeah, no, he's not doing that. But I'm saying he was just asking me, do you ever anymore at all, or why don't you? And I was saying no, and I was explaining why, and he was like, why not? And I'm like, the starting point, just as an example, the starting point of that is total, complete, pure self-interest. Think about it. Why does a person, just as an example, drink alcohol?
So they can have fun.
Loosen up.
It's not just having fun. There's nothing wrong with having fun. Nothing wrong with loosening up.
Do you mean if you
Follow it back, trace it back.
or if you follow it forward, it's like it's because they want to not like think about the consequences to what they're doing.
They want to escape.
That's all part of it too, but it's even more fundamental than that, is what I was looking at. It's for the next period of time.
Wait, let me just guess for like 20 more minutes. Okay.
You're gonna get drunk, right? And then it lasts a while, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. For that period of time, reality is all about you and how you feel. That's it.
Oh, cool.
Are you able to be effective when you're drinking?
No.
Now, there are people who are pre-programmed. It's like you see them on the TV shows, right? They're like drinking, and they're like the CEO of a company, and they're like drinking during the day. First of all, nobody was doing that back in the day. Nobody was drinking during the fucking day. Okay. And even if these guys drink all night and then they go to work the next morning, all they have to do is be a fucking asshole and tell other people to do their job anyways. It's not like they're doing anything anyways. Right. And then they're probably a dick to their kids and family. It's not like they're having a great life. They're just in a position where they're still going to make a lot of money from doing that. That's not the average person. So what I'm saying is, if you're looking at, I want to do what's best, and you're going to go drink for that period of time, it's all about you and how you feel. Do you see? So for myself, it's like, why would I do that? I still have to consider myself and how I feel and my experience and so forth. But if somebody was to call me, or my child had a question for me or whatever, and I was drunk or drinking, I'm not effective. And somebody can say, well, I'll just do it on certain times and so forth. But then you have to really start asking yourself, like, what's your starting point? Why are you doing that? Because when you're serious about standing up and making a difference, you realize you don't have any time to waste.
I remember when I kind of quit like my addictions and things like that. Even if I was like, okay, one time a week, I'll indulge, whether it be doing drugs or drinking or mainly smoking weed or drinking or playing video games, a lot of video games. Right? When I removed that, because you have to realize, for those of you listening, it's like, even if you're doing it once a week, once a month, when something bad happens, you have the thought, I can't wait till the X. I just want to X. And it might not even be in your conscious awareness, but it's an automated pattern. When something bad happens, then you're like, okay, I want that upper, whatever it is, to let me forget about this point. When I let go of all of that, it's like, one, I had to face how fucking dumb I was, or how ineffectual I was, right? About how I couldn't get the results I wanted in my life. But it's like, I had to get creative in solving my problems, because I couldn't just go to my addiction to kind of just keep me happy. Like you said, like it's just to keep me happy.
That's the point people are missing when they're kind of still in this,
right?
Is that you're holding yourself back from solving your problems and then moving on to another level of responsibility. So no matter what level you're at right now, if you're doing those things, you're holding yourself back from going to the next point. And that's the real major issue.
How did this come up? Before talking about, you were talking to Kian?
Like, why did I bring it up?
Yeah.
Well, because I was looking at the point of just people standing up and taking self-responsibility,
Right.
and actually, and so you have to look at all the things in which you're just not doing that, like just bullshitting, and then you want to complain. And the thing is, it's going to be too late eventually for that person. So going into despair, it's like, stand up, do what we're talking about, support other people to stand up, so that we can go into the levels where the elite make the decisions. Because if we don't do it, who's going to do it? You know, if you don't own your own stadium, if you don't own your own property, then you're always going to be at the rules of the people who do own it. I mean, imagine, just really imagine for yourself, let's just say you don't do anything, nobody does anything, and now you fast forward to however many years in the future, and literally you don't own anything. There's not a single thing you own. There's not a single place you're allowed to go unless you're told you can go there. Like right now, I live in Texas, right? I can walk out my front door and just walk anywhere. You know what I mean? I can't go into someone's private home. Okay. I can't, you know, maybe someone has like a business that's like, you know, let's say a oil company. I can't just go walk into their offices and walk around. Like, that's private property, right? But generally speaking, I can just go walk around and kind of do what I want. Right? Imagine a scenario in the future where literally you can't even leave your door. It's like locked. And if you do leave, you're being tracked on your phone. And it's like an alert's going off if you're going too close here or there. And you're thinking, oh, that's great, because then I'll never get sick. What? Do you know what I mean? Like, what? You're never going to, oh, so you're just going to stay in your home for the rest of your life just because you don't ever want to get sick. And you know what's so funny too, man? This is the thing that gets me the most. Like, what's the whole argument been about why we should lock down and not go out and everything? Why? Who are we protecting?
Grandma and grandpa.
But we put them in fucking old folks' homes and don't ever go visit them. And we
Yeah.
don't. Does anyone actually give a fuck about their grandparents?
Wow.
You know, I'm not saying there's nobody who doesn't care about their grandparents, but
I
if
get
you
the
look
point
at
you're making,
the
yeah.
masses of people, how many, I'm going to look that up right now as we're talking. How many fucking people are in old folks' homes?
Quote, end quote.
How many people in old, what is it, retirement? I don't know what you call it.
And
Retirement.
Or nursing
old
homes.
people home. Yeah. Retirement homes and nursing homes.
Nursing homes, yeah.
That's a really good
There's
point.
1.4 million people in the US in nursing homes.
Wow.
33% are 85 to 95, and about 8% are 95 or older. So there's 1.5 million. And you want to pretend like you care about these people.
Where 60% of them are younger than 85, right? Because it said like 33 and 7 is above 85. So younger than 85. They still got life, huh?
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm going to look up and see what's the
60% is less.
15% are younger than 65. So it looks like between 65 to 85, it's about 42%.
Right.
And if you include the younger than 65, it's over half, well over half. Yeah, I was like you said, about 60% are less than 85. And so, and then we act like we care about it. But the reality is, all they're doing, the elite, is playing on people's guilt.
Yeah.
It's like my grandma died alone in a nursing home and nobody could come visit her. I'm like, oh, so she missed out on that one visit this quarter.
Yeah, exactly. What about when you could go visit her? How often would you really go?
It's like, why didn't you have her living at your house and taking care of her every day? Because she's the reason you exist. And I'm not saying people should go do that. We should have places where old people who are like fucking decrepit can have a really amazing life. But we used to go visit my great grandmother in the nursing home, and it was not a fucking nice place.
You know what I think a lot of people look at, like the severity of what's going on is definitely 1984, right? But I think the stages in which it happens is more like Animal Farm. You know
Animal
what I mean?
Farm?
Yeah, like in Animal Farm, it was like they'd make up these rules and everyone would be like, yeah, that's a good rule. and then they'd slowly start switching everything, and then everyone would be like, "Wait, was that always like this? I don't remember it being like this." You know, and it just kind of like slowly more and more and more, like it becomes the exact thing that you made up all these rules to avoid, right?
It's so funny how easy it is to manipulate it. Of like, okay, once I become president, just 100 days, just 100 days, and it's playing on that point of like, come on,
Remember, it was 15 days.
Yeah.
come on, just
Come on, just do it.
You're like,
Just
yeah, okay,
100
fuck
days.
it.
It's just a
No,
third
but-
of your
But
year.
seriously, like if you're saying that it's gonna end this virus, fuck it.
Hold on. Imagine
then-
if you have a baby who just got born. 100 days. That's a long time in their fucking life. What were you gonna
Yeah.
say? Yes, I cut you off.
It's like, and it's funny because a friend that had reached out, an old friend, he was saying how when his wife gave birth, I think I don't know if it was on the podcast or what. You don't fucking know.
You don't have to say his full name and address. That's
phone number or email. But basically, he was just saying how he his wife gave birth and he wasn't able to be there because his test came in too late because she was due on this day, but so he got his test here, but she went into labor a couple days early, and he had to FaceTime there. And I remember telling Maylat that, and she was like, "That would be fucking horrifying."
Yeah, you know,
Giving birth
we
and
had
not
our kids
having
at
your
home.
partner there.
Yeah, why didn't he just have them at home?
See, but again,
Listen,
people
no
hear
one's
that
just-
and they're like, "What? That's crazy. Why would you do that?"
Yeah.
If anything, you should realize like you shouldn't trust these experts anymore. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. Why can't this guy? Isn't he going to go home with the baby at some point?
Doesn't make any sense. But basically on that just 15 days, just 100 days. Like imagine if the point they're playing on is
What if they're like, it's just 1,000 days, guys?
this is 14 years. Like after 14 years, we're done. It's like that thing of like, okay, you know what? If that's a compromise, if we all just stay home for 30 days, if we all just stay home for 28 days, 14 days, 100 days, wear the mask, whatever, it's gone. Okay. But then right at the end of it, they're like, fuck, it's worse than we thought. It's just so easy.
Every time you read it, it's like it's the most people have ever died in one day, and you're like,
every single time. But
where?
you look out your window. But it's like
I'm
now
telling
it's
you
just
guys,
about, now it's just about the
start
case.
doing this. Hold on. Start doing this. Start asking people you know. Do you know anyone who died? I've been doing this with like everybody.
Yeah.
And it's always the immediate answer is no. And then in some cases it's like, well, I know this one guy, his uncle died. And I'm like, really? And they're like, and then they always say, well, yeah, but he also had like diabetes, or he had a heart problem.
Yeah, that's true. And
it's like, okay, like that sucks.
uh-huh.
Why don't you lock that person in a room for the rest of their life?
Hmm.
Think about it. You know, Kevin Trudeau made this really cool point at the beginning of all this. He said the reason why one of the major reasons why this is happening is because they're covering up the fact that people have so many pre-existing conditions.
Yeah.
That there's so many people who are like immune, basically deficient in our current world.
Yeah.
And so like, is it attacking people in that context? Or in other words, are people more susceptible to whatever's going on because of that? Yes. But what are we going to do about it? Is this the world we want to create? That's going to solve the problem? We're creating conditions where people are going to be more suppressed. I mean, how do you feel about life? How does the average person anyways feel about life compared to before all this happened? Worse, right?
Yeah.
That's creating conditions for better health. And so now everyone's going to be locked down, constantly monitored, everything controlled, no private property. You can't build a business anymore. Like you're basically either not allowed to, or the resources, there's no way you'll be able to do it.
Always afraid of people.
Except for one condition, techno-tutor, but let's say that aside. Okay. But what I'm saying is in the normal way, look like your dream was to have a restaurant. Do you know that it's like 100,000 or some fucking crazy number of restaurants that were shut down?
Mayla was showing me
I don't
on
know if that
some-
was just
some
in
Facebook
California
group.
or the whole US or what, but it's still insane. Huh?
There was
Yeah.
some like basically obituary for like restaurants where it's like, oh, like rest in peace to like these 29 restaurants that couldn't make it this month or this week or whatever. It's like, whoa.
Dude, and some of these restaurants are really good too.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like they're bad restaurants. Like, oh yeah, it was a shitty restaurant anyway. You know, I don't even know how they were around. It's like the restaurants that everyone loved. Everyone like still was trying to like, oh, you got to support your restaurant, you know, through this
That
thing.
would
And
suck, man. I'd be hurt if where I get my butter chicken from shut down. That'd be fun. But it's okay. Maylad's gonna learn.
Guys, it would be such a shame. People would have to learn to make food at home.
Yeah, Maylad's learning the butter chicken.
Dude.
Also, most of the restaurants get their food from the same suppliers, from like Cisco,
yeah,
which is all shit.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I've
Yeah.
lost a lot of weight just from us eating at home more. And Katie's making like chicken and spaghetti and
Like,
bread and all this
It's
stuff. And
also
I've
really
still lost
juicy
tons of
stuff.
weight.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and so, but it's because that whole food supply chain is fucked.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that it's good for people to lose their livelihood. Obviously, we don't want people to suffer, but this is a huge wake up call for people. Again, is everyone just going to wake up? No, all that's going to happen is people are going to become more aware that there's a problem. It's like, it'd be like if you were in school and you were like, if everyone would just know that there's math problems, we'd all be able to solve them. It's like, well, okay, let's say everybody in the class was aware that there was math problems. That makes them able to solve them. Do you see the cognitive dissonance here?
Yeah.
If everyone just knew that there was this problem, everyone woke up. So how does that change your first 7 years of your life, your programming? How does that change your ability to communicate? How does that change your ability to build a business that's not going to be fucking dominated by Amazon or somebody else?
Yeah.
It doesn't change any of that. And that's what we're talking about. That's why, okay, so to go to the point, despair. I can understand why people would have feelings of despair based on what they already know. But based on what we know, is there any reason to despair?
No.
If you're willing to take self-responsibility, you're willing to challenge yourself and grow and push past limitations, and you understand the tools and the principles that we're promoting, you'll realize there's an actual solution. And it's not one based in hope, right? The funny thing about hope is it feels more guaranteed because it's not based on you. It's just, you're just hoping it. And you put a lot of energy to it. And the more energy you put into it, it's like, it's guaranteed, but it's not actually, right? It doesn't matter how much you feel about it. That doesn't guarantee it.
You know why it feels guaranteed? It's because you know your limitations and you know, like within yourself, you're not willing to do a lot of those things.
But
And
you've
so-
also lied to yourself.
What do you mean? Why does that make it guaranteed?
Because like
That
if you can
shit's
put
gonna hit the fan, or
no. When you have hope, it
Mhm.
feels more guaranteed because
Mhm.
you know it's not guaranteed within yourself as far as if it was up to you.
oh, okay. If you had to take self-responsibility, you know
Right.
that's not going to be the case. So
Right.
might
That's
as
what I'm
well-
saying. Yeah. But you have to lie to yourself about it. You imbue it with all this energy. It's no different than feeling like you're in love with somebody. Just because you feel that way doesn't mean they feel that way about you.
It doesn't mean it's going to work out.
I mean, you're like, you know, being a guy growing up, it's like there's this girl you really like, right? She's not even thinking about you.
Right.
The feeling is not mutual.
And
Yeah.
same thing, vice versa.
You can't understand why she doesn't like you.
How many times is it you get in your first relationship, you fall in love for the first time, right? You fall into love or whatever, and that's the one that you end up with. You know what I mean? Like, do you think it's like number of relationships equals number of marriages that never get divorced? It's like shots on goal equals number of goals. You know what I mean? It's the shots on net, right? It's not the case. And so the point is, like, just even the divorces, right? It's like you guys both made that commitment of like through thick and thin, like you're the fucking one, right? And that doesn't even work out. But you're putting your hope in something that you have no idea how it works.
That's exactly. You're just
Making a
hoping.
difference. Exactly.
So we're not hoping,
Mm.
but we also know there's no guarantee.
Yeah.
It takes a little bit of courage to say there's no guarantee. But if I don't do X, Y, and Z, it's guaranteed not to happen.
right.
But if I do X, Y, and Z, that's how it would happen. So think about it. You can either be in despair or know that you can do it. But you can't have a feeling of certainty that it's going to be okay. You're not allowed to have that. Until when? Until it's okay.
So that happens. Yeah.
Everybody wants the thing before they have it. They call that faith. But faith is the most abused fucking thing ever. The problem is, I've seen it in my own life, it only ever leads to not taking full self-responsibility. The faith that you need to have is that if you do it, the result is what you're going to get. But that's not really faith, is it? It's just, it's more of like a recognition of, I can't control what other people do, but I can be an influence. I can push myself past every limit. So if I can do it, then can another person do it?
Yes.
That's the only faith that you need. And it's not really faith in that sense. You know what I'm saying? It's not a hopeful faith. It's more of a, well, if I can do it, I know logically they can. I can't make them do it, but if I can do it, why wouldn't they do it?
Yeah.
That's called having faith in humanity. Otherwise, what are you supposed to do? Just go into despair. But then you're the reason why it's not going to happen.
That's such a good point. That's such a good point. It's like, if you go into despair, you're the one holding it up. If you think like, it's because I can't do it, or not everyone else is going to do it, but you're the one who's not actually moving, you're the one stopping everything.
Like, imagine like sitting in darkness and you're like complaining like to your buddy, you're like, it's so dark, like it doesn't make any sense. And the person's like, okay, let's go turn on this light switch, but it requires both of us. We both have to put our hand on the light switch, like two separate panels. He's like, there's no point. Like, it's like, how do you even know that's going to work? And they're just willing to just sit in the darkness. It's like, at least come try it, because what the fuck else are you going to do? And then the point is, that would be the reason why you never fucking find out. It's because you went into the despair. You decided within yourself of like, I can't change, so fuck it. This world can't change, so I'm just going to try to enjoy myself in my last days by being locked down and being in fear, and never actually overcoming my anxiety to like everything and everyone. It's like, what if you just started there and working through those points step by step? You would naturally open up. It was cool talking on the last call we had before this in the parenting group about how it's funny. I was talking to two people and I was mentioning this point because they both were like, they're going into that same point of, yeah, like, how do we know that things, they didn't say it like that. They said, basically the despair point is like, yeah, but what if we don't figure it out? Right. Like, how is it that one person can, then you have the big giants. How are we going to have any effect when you have these big giants and all this stuff? And then they listen to your wishes, your command. So I was just referring to that point. There was 2 points. There was, how are we going to make a difference when there's such big people who don't want that to happen? And the other point was, well, don't you think that there's some force in the world where even if we all do it and we get a lot of people to grassroots movement, right, really figure it out and walk those points out of ourselves, that there's still going to be people who want to do bad stuff, right? It's like, you remember that story in Your Wish Is Your Command, where it's like, but we can make billions of dollars or millions or billions of dollars, but many people are going to die. But we can make money, but many people are going to die. Fuck, let them die. Let's make the money. He's like, aren't there always going to be people like that? And I said, just because there's some force that's just going to keep people like that. And I mentioned 3 points. The first one was, what's mysticism? Mysticism is believing that there are influences in this world that we're just at effect to, which is not true. Outside of what we're all participating in, like, if we believe in some invisible hand and then never do anything, then yeah, you're at effect to the market, right? But there's nothing beyond the human beings that are.
It's an effect that exists only because we're allowing it and we're creating it, not because
Right.
it exists outside of our control. So literally, there is no mysticism, really.
Right. Exactly. The second thing was taking 100% responsibility. So it's like, well, taking 100% responsibility was actually grouped in with that first one. So it's like, what if you actually looked at how you can take responsibility for that point of where inside of you are you deciding to just go with money rather than stand up, rather than consider what would be best to do?
Which also requires you to make money.
Exactly.
Beyond what you're doing now. And so the reality is, just to interject, if people aren't really making it based on money, they're making it based on survival rather than what's best.
Right,
Money,
exactly.
it doesn't have to be a choice between money, because either way you have to use money.
You're actually making the choice to make less money than what
Exactly.
you're actually capable of. That's a really good point. And so the second part was, by design, what Kevin Trudeau talks about in the beginning of Your Wish Is Your Command, everything by design is to make you feel like you're powerless. That's why everybody feels that way. It's like, what are we going to do? But you remember that guy from the KGB and like what all the higher ups who are really watching everything that's going on, who maybe were in a position of influence before, and now they're willing to just explain how things work at the highest levels. They're like, yeah, if you want to control society, you can't do it without the consent of the people. You can't do it against the people's will, because you actually do have power. It's like even the tech guys or the titans of industry, it's not the global couple of people or whoever, relatively small handful of people that have the power. They're counting on these people to do what they say, right? And the reason they would do it, the reason why we produce people who would choose to make the millions or billions of dollars over the lives of people is because we created and participate in a system that rewards that. With your life gets better because you have more money, because that's the only indicator of, well, on paper, right, of like the more money you have, the better off your life is. So simply put, it's like if we create a system that produces or values or rewards a different point, a different form of measurement, then people would be incentivized to do different things.
Somebody might say, well, how do you create that system?
The first thing to consider, if you can't see it all, because I'm gonna be honest, it took me time. It took a lot of time to really understand the different points where I'm like, okay, this could actually be real. But it was equal to understanding the system inside of yourself about how you value profit or individual benefit over,
Right.
like,
So in other words,
what's best.
you changing yourself. And then you're like, oh, therefore we could change the outside points.
Oh, that's why Jeff
Can't
Bezos does what he
change.
does.
It can't change if you like, what does Jeff Bezos value inside of himself?
Hmm.
Clearly. Otherwise he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't be in that position. It'd be somebody else maybe. So if you change within yourself what you value, that doesn't mean you're like, well, I'm just going to give away all my money. That's also stupid, isn't it? Because how are you ever going to be in a position of influence then? But if you realize I value what's actually best, okay, so then I have to now take a higher position of responsibility. So if I can change that within myself to change what I value and what's important and the principles from which I live, then when I'm in a position to change a law, I can put those principles into it. Right?
And I like what you said on this one particular point, because some people are hoping, yeah, we'll all get attached to, devices that give us the brain power of like us times like a million or whatever. If the solution doesn't require you to change, and that's just one of many, right? But basically, if the solution doesn't require you to change, it's not real.
Asif,
Have you ever go ahead.
You've also made this point of like, and you said it really clearly on one of our hangouts, but that profit like is the same thing as the feelings that you allow yourself to have, right? Those good emotional feelings, like
Profit inside, yeah.
Yeah. And that's like really not just when we're talking about like what Jeff Bezos values or what you value, it's not just the money, it's that internal feeling inside yourself that really needs to change.
Because ask anybody in like Your Wish Is Your Command, right? It's like Black Mercedes, why do you want that?
Because of how you feel.
Exactly.
It's like you need to get the feeling of what it would be like. And remember, obviously, everything that people want, they have to pay for it, right? It's like their dream is to have a boat or have a beautiful
People say
house.
like they don't care about money, but it's
Right. It's like, I just want to be free. Why aren't you free again?
Okay. And is it because you don't have money? Let's just take that aside for a moment. Let's pretend for a moment it's not because of even though let's say you don't have money, but you're thinking it's not because I don't have money. That's not why. Well, is anything else anyone else is doing affecting your ability to feel the way you want to feel? Because if so, then you have to ask yourself, what's the starting point of their decisions? And honestly, this has been the best year for a lot of reasons, 2020, but it's been an amazing year to show the love and light people that you do not create your own reality.
Wow. That's a good point.
Someone says, oh, but I don't ever have to wear a mask. What state do you live in? I live in Florida. Well, there you go. You know, ask the people who live in fucking Sweden, or not Sweden. That's actually a bad example.
Washington,
Panama,
Yeah.
wherever. Right? I create my own reality. You don't create your own reality. If you do, stop fucking posting those videos about Dr. Fauci. What does his life have to do with yours?
Right.
You know, and so there's going to be people who continue to delude themselves, but I think it's supported a lot of people to really wake up and go, oh, some of the things I believe, it's not real. Go ahead.
We're at this point in time, societally and individually. It's like you're either going to go, it's the fork. It's like you're either going to go way down into some delusional, like you're going to have to create a lot of bullshit to insulate yourself from everything that's going on. Or what we're seeing more of, it's because we're finding those people who are like, holy fuck, I need to change. Holy fuck, I need to do better. I need to do better for my kids. I need to do better for my relationship. I need to do better for this world, because holy shit, like in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years, in 50 years, what is this place going to look like if I don't stand up? And it's becoming this point where things are being so accelerated and pressed, where people are starting to see like, oh, now I'm considering the future a little bit more. And because of that, it's like people are making the decision. Okay, so what were you saying? You said you guys seem kind of certain you got something going on. I'll put my judgments aside about you guys all being assholes or whatever the case may be, right? And I'll hear what you have to say. And then from there, they're like, oh shit, okay, I'll take this on for myself, even though I don't see the full picture. And it's really cool, because I would say people that I didn't think would ever take on this process for themselves, because they were so self-interested, because they were everything was going right for them. I'm seeing those people more and more be like, yeah, there's more to life than what I've accepted. And what gives me quote unquote faith, right, is like when I hear stories like, you know, Maylat will tell me, I would say like the most generally unaware people who just kind of like watch the media, do their, like, go on with their life, like go party, whatever. It's like those people are like, this whole pandemic thing is kind of fucking weird, right? It's like they're like questioning things now. It's like, I don't understand why. Exactly. I'm like, so they're questioning things, right?
Still going on.
Now imagine when fucking COVID-21 comes out. People are gonna be like, but I swear this wasn't happening like 5 years ago. Like
you search online, and you're like, this is the first one.
Exactly, right?
So we've only been in lockdown for 3 weeks. You know that point you're making about the fork up and down?
Uh-huh.
The way that the downward fork will be done in another way, because you have the people who are going to go into their mental delusions, which I think is what you were alluding to.
On the individual. Yeah.
But from a system perspective, it's going to be the introduction of virtual reality.
Right.
And things like that, where it makes it like, hey, look, just stay at home. We'll give you a different reality to participate in. Don't worry. But it's like anything. You ever got like the new PS whatever, or the new Xbox, or the new thing, and you're like, this is so amazing. But after a while, it wears off.
I just want to be here. Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? After a while, it wears off.
Yeah.
Nothing that's an illusion actually ever
lasts.
It seems like it, because it's like, it just seems better.
Mm-hmm.
But when your starting point is always that thing that's better, you're always chasing this point, and it never is going to be fulfilling.
Yeah.
You know, so if you're not totally 100% in bliss, satisfied right now with where things are at, why would the next thing that comes along give you that? It's never ending. Do you see? So just give that up. Start getting to reality and realize the only way for me to ever have that is when it's available to everybody. Like it's a natural state.
Yeah.
If you've ever done ecstasy, right? It's like that feeling. I remember the few times I did it where it's like, oh man, this is what it'd be like if I never had to worry about bills or anything. You know what I mean? It's just like, I feel so light. Like I just feel like everything just went off my shoulders. Like, wow.
Yeah. The feeling I had was like, wow, this is what it would feel like if I wasn't so self-conscious.
Exactly. It's like don't care as much.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying we should just go around being like, oh, but what I'm saying though is that feeling I had of like, it felt like just like wind blowing through me, you know, like there was no worries, there was nothing. And I'm like, I knew for that moment, if we removed all the stress of survival off everyone, which we could do, and to say that you can't, it's like, do you think Bill Gates wakes up with any level of stress relatively that you ever have experienced in terms of survival? And I'm not saying the guy doesn't have stress, but in terms of what he's stressed about compared to what you're stressed about, imagine the person who's literally like, I have to make my bills. Like, I know what that's like. That's not, it's funny. I say that's not what he's thinking of, but he's got to probably make billions of dollars of bills. Do you know what I mean? So is there anyone who is experiencing that bliss actually? But then think about this. So you could take the argument of, well, even he's got all this stress, right? Let's say that's true. So then you getting $1 billion in the current world isn't going to make you happy, is it?
Right.
And if he is experiencing a higher levels of bliss, happiness, whatever, because he's the position he's in, then why shouldn't everyone have that? Because how many Bill Gateses can there be? There's only like 1,000 something billionaires.
I think the correct plural for that is Bill Gates eye. like cacti, you know.
Okay, I took Latin. That's not what it is. It's Bill Gatey. No.
but it's a good point, because it's like, yeah, no matter where you're at in this system, you're not going to have stress, because that's by design.
Nobody has anybody's best interest at heart.
Exactly.
Not even the experts. Think about it. The expert became an expert just by pursuing happiness, by chasing the next promotion, by kind of trying to get their dream. Like, they're not an expert because they're just this superior, amazing, benevolent human being. They're an expert because they're good at playing the game. Just like in your life, when you've had those wins, it wasn't because you're a good person. It's just because you played the game, whatever it was. Yeah. You know, when you go to work and you're just like, fucking here at work, like that's how they feel about their job too. The reason why they seem like they know more is because your vocabulary sucks. This is really, maybe we can wrap it up soon here, but it's like, this is really what it comes down to, is giving everyone an effective vocabulary that raises everybody up. It's funny. I did a post like a couple weeks ago, and I was like, why level the playing field when we can bring everybody up? And somebody was like, oh, more communist gobbledygook. And I was like, what? What? How is that communist? Bring everybody up? He's like, well, that's what a communist would say. I'm like, okay, my kid can read. He's only 4.
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about? So you don't want that for everybody? What is your point?
Yeah.
We're not talking about bring everybody down. It's really about, if you bring everybody up to a standard where they can connect the dots, and to a standard where they can function in a world where, hey guys, we figured out how to give everybody what they need, like the basics. Can you be okay with that? Because as things stand right now, the average person actually can't be okay with that. In their DNA, at the level of their consciousness, everything, they're pursuing they have to be the winner.
Yeah.
We have to fundamentally shift that within people so that giving everyone what they need doesn't become fucking dictator controlled tyranny, because that is what it would become given the current state of human nature right now. So the reason why we don't have that despair is because we know human nature can change, because that's what we're doing for ourselves.
Yeah.
And then we just give that to the next person, and they support themselves to change. And then that, like you were saying, Drake, the next person, you become an influence in your community. But it requires self-responsibility. It requires also going through a lot of fear. Instead of just looking for the easy answer to relieve your fear, which is why people go into hope, instead of that, go into the fear and do the thing you're afraid of. That's how you get to that next level of responsibility. And a lot of people are going to have to walk through that. And we're going to require more and more people to walk through it so they can support others to walk through it.
Yeah.
It can't just be us.
That also requires self-honesty. That also requires like understanding and doing what's best for all. That also requires all those principles that you can find on our website. But the reason why I bring that up, specifically about self-honesty, is because then people will use that to justify doing something else that they fear that is actually just going to perpetuate the system, is actually just what they've told
Yeah, like,
themselves or
oh, I'm
lied to
afraid of
themselves.
jumping off a cliff or something. It's like, well, no, that's just stupid.
Right. Or I'm afraid of, uh, selling drugs. It's like, that's stupid too,
Right, exactly.
you
And you
know?
have to be self-honest with it. When I say fear, it's like the fear of saying to somebody, the fear of sharing specifically what we're talking about. If you want to face real fear, study what we're saying and then share that with people. That's where you're going to face the real fear, the fear of being outcast from society, the fear of being rejected by others, and those things. You can face fear in a lot of ways in the system that may be beneficial to a certain degree in terms of your survival, but not ultimately are going to challenge anything. So face fear by supporting other people to change themselves, to change their starting point. And the first way you're going to face it is by facing the fears within yourself of like, well, how can there be a world that's best for all? Right. So you mentioned the website. Obviously, those principles that we have there is not our principles. Like we came up with them. It's the destiny principles, but really it's like the distillation of the common sense within every major philosophy, religion, the actual best things from within all of that. So it's not like we have some special claim to it. We just have it there. So it's easy way to find it. Right. But what else should we share? The Hangouts. I think someone said like not the last one, but the one before we had like 58 people on the Hangout. Right.
Yeah.
And then I was there on the Hangout last week, and there was like what?
38 or
38.
something.
That was on New Year's Day.
Yeah.
I was like, wow.
I was surprised, man. That's crazy.
This time next year, it's going to be over several hundreds of people.
Yeah, we won't be able to do it on
thousands.
Zoom anymore.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know what? Here's the thing. Even if we're not able to have a Hangout with 1,000 people or 100, more than 100 people or whatever, you could have your own Hangout. There could be 10 people having Hangouts with 100 people on them. And or 10 people on them or whatever it is. It doesn't really matter. Again, it's not about us having a big hangout and having lots of people. The numbers matter from the perspective of people actually walking this process. Right? That's really what counts. When we look at the number of people that we have in there, how much it's grown, that's cool. But what I want to see is other people really walking the process. That at this stage is more important than just numbers. Although the numbers are good because you're going to have obviously some people who don't do it right away and they need to see other people's proof and change and everything. So it is good to have numbers, but at the end of the day, we're not doing this for that reason, if that makes sense. It's more about the actual change because that's what the numbers have to reflect, right? Ask if you want to wrap it up.
If there's any single point as to why you should do this process that I think would appeal to most people, if you're not 100% certain about why you're doing what you're doing already right now, if you're like, I feel like I'm just making money, like I feel like there's more to life or whatever the case may be, if you're not 100% certain about what your purpose is, if you're not 100% certain about where the world is going, if you're not 100% certain about who you are, just start this process with the intent of sorting yourself out. I know we talk a lot about society and the world, and if you're not ready to consider those things, that's okay. If you just find this interesting, just start with yourself. If you start there, everything else will slowly fall into place. And if you start now, in a year from now, you will be unrecognizable to yourself. You're going to change in ways that you couldn't even conceive of. So don't take my word for it. Try it for yourself, because what else is there? Seriously, try to answer that question. What else is there? You're just going to keep being afraid, keep questioning things. I don't really, I hear a lot of people say, I don't really think there are answers to these questions. Yes, there is. There are. If you actually want the answer. Because what if the answer is, yeah, you need to change, and here's how to change? Do you want the answer? Because it's waiting for you, baby. self-perfected.com. Check out the Facebook group, answer the questions, hop in there. Global Hangouts every Friday. Basics units to show you how to be effective in taking apart your past and being effective in the world we live in today, so that we can bring about the world we want. Other than that, till next time.
One last thing I want to add just real quick to our troll in the comments. I apologize for not making this podcast longer. We'll try harder next time.
Oh yeah, go for
It's,
4 hours. Yeah.
We'll
Shout
see.
out.
We'll see you because I know you're watching. We'll see you next time.
Awesome.